Today we will discuss the model of the knee joint. So knee joint is a very complex variety of the joint because in whole of the human body the synovial joints they are mainly formed by the two bones. But here three bones they are participating: the lower end of femur, upper end of tibia, and the sesamoid bone, largest sesamoid bone of the body, that is the patella. So when we view the knee joint from the anterior side or the front side, what we see in the lower part of the femur, there are two condyles, the lateral and the medial condyle in the lower part, and in between the condyle there is a intercondylar smooth area that is called the patellar surface, which is large lateral and small medial in composition. And anterior surface of the tibia bears same condyles as the lateral and medial condyle, with the tibial tuberosity in front of the upper part of the shaft of the tibia. If we view the knee joint posteriorly, the posterior surface of the lower end of the femur represent the two lateral and medial lips of the linea aspera, or the posterior border of the femur. When we continue downward the linea aspera, the posterior border of the femur, medially it is continued as the medial supracondylar line, and laterally it bears the lateral supracondylar line. And in between the two condyles there is a intercondylar rough area of the lower end of the femur. If we see the posterior surface of the upper end of the tibia, we see here that the two condyles, the lateral and the medial condyles, are reciprocally, and the superior surface of the tibia, and which has got the large medial surface and the small lateral surface of the superior surface of the tibial shaft. Then posterior surface of the shaft of the tibia, it bears the soleal line, which is the oblique line for the origin of the soleus muscle, and laterally is the shaft, and laterally is the fibula, the head, neck, and the shaft of the fibula. Fibula doesn't take part in the knee joint formation because it is a non-weight bearing joint. So when we stand, the transmission of the weight goes from the femur to the tibia and then to the foot, and not by the fibula. So fibula is a non-weight bearing bone. So now when the knee joint is formed by the lower end of the femur and the upper end of the tibia, the first thing, the joint formation of any synovial joint, is the requirement is the fibrous capsule. So fibrous capsule is like a sellotape which is bringing the two bones together in all movements of the synovial variety of any joint. So fibrous capsule of the knee joint is attached superiorly to the lower end of the femur, and inferiorly it is attached to the upper end of the tibia. See, its attachment is very important. So if you see the fibrous capsule attachment on the tibia, on the lower end of the femur, then this fibrous tissue attachment anteriorly, it starts from the medial condyle of the femur, attached to the non-articular part. Then this line goes downward towards the tibia, from here it goes to the medial condyle of the femur, with the adductor tubercle lies outside the fibrous capsule. So this fibrous capsule line starts from here and runs obliquely downward on the anterior surface of the femur, and then is continued on the upper end of the tibia up to the tibial tuberosity. So this is the fibrous tissue capsule attachment on the medial side of the femur. Similarly, the fibrous capsule of the knee joint, it is attached to the lateral condyle of the femur in the non-articular part. Then this fibrous capsule runs obliquely downward and then obliquely on the
anterior surface of the tibia up to the tibial tuberosity. So beyond this point, so fibroscapular attachment is this linear, that is both laterally as well as the medial. So we can say the fibrous capsule covers the anterior surface of the knee joint, but it is deficient in the anterior part. Beyond this line, there is no fibrous capsule. So what happens? So from this line of the fibrous capsule attachment, so from this point to the patella, there is no fibrous capsule. So why there is no capsule? Why it is deficient? It is only and only because of the quadriceps femoris muscle. We know anteriorly, the anterior surface of the shaft of the femur is related to the quadriceps muscles. Quadri means the four muscles. So the upper one is this, the rectus femoris. Below is the origin of the vastus intermediaris. From lateral side, these muscle fibers, they are the vastus lateralis. Coming from behind, from the linea aspera, they take origin and they skirts around the lateral surface of the femur, and then they come anteriorly and they merge with the vastus intermediaris. Same, the rectus femoris also merges with the vastus intermediaris. Medially, this is the vastus medialis. So vastus medialis muscle fibers, they go downward and then they also merge with the vastus intermedialis. Hence, the quadriceps femoris muscle is formed. So, this explains that why the fibrous capsule doesn't go beyond this line, because in between the deficient part of the fibrous capsule, laterally and medially, is occupied by the quadriceps femoris muscle superiorly, and below the patella by the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, which is popularly known as the ligamentum patelli, which is a misnomer. It is not the ligament of the patella, it is actually the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, which is inserted on the tibial tuberosity. So this gap of the fibrous capsule attachment laterally and medially from the fibrous capsule attachment, so this area is now closed by the superior by the vastus medialis muscle fibers, and below this green one they show the epineurotic fibers of the vastus medialis. Similarly, laterally, this green represents the aponeurotic fibers of the vastus lateralis, which forms what is called the lateral retinocula and the medial retinocula of the knee joint. So these retinoculum fibers, they are the aponeurotic fibers of vastus medialis and lateralis, which fills the gap of the fibrous capsule. And inferiorly, they are attached to the lateral border of the quadri, the ligamentum patelli. So they are called the retinocula. So this is how anteriorly the deficient part of the fibrous capsule is closed by the retinocula and the quadriceps femoris tendon. So this is how knee joint is anteriorly related to the quadriceps femoris and ligamentum patelli part. Now we look what is happening posteriorly. The attachment of the fibrous capsule posteriorly. So fibrous capsule of the knee joint posteriorly, it is attached to the non-articular part of the lateral condyle of the femur as well as the medial condyle of the femur. So it is represented by a straight line and non-interrupted line. Anteriorly it was interrupted, but posteriorly when we mark the fibrous capsular attachment to the posterior surface of the femur, we mark by a continuous line from medial to the lateral condyle, keeping the adductor tubercle outside. So adductor tubercle is extracapsular. Similarly, now this fibrous capsule then runs downward towards the tibia and then is attached to the posterior surface of the lateral condyle of the non-articular part of the medial condyle of the tibia. Then again it is interrupted here, just below behind the posterior surface of the lateral condyle of the tibia. It is now deficient here, or it is shown by an interrupted line here. Then again this fibrous capsule starts from here and then
it goes circumferentially to the lateral condyle of the tibia, and then it meets with the fellow part of the fibrous capsular attachment of the lateral condyle of the femur anteriorly. So now the question arises, why it is interrupted here? As we have seen in the anterior surface of the femur, it is interrupted because of the quadriceps femoris muscle. So answer of this is why this line is interrupted here just behind the lateral condyle of the tibia. It is because of the popliteus muscle. As we know, popliteus muscle origin is the intracapsular, extrasynovial and tendinous. Now this popliteus muscle is the unlocking muscle of the knee joint. It has to come outside the fibrous capsule. So its origin is intracapsular, but here it is interrupted, or there is a way, or there is a gateway is formed for the popliteus muscle. So from this interruption of the fibrous capsule here behind the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia, now here this popliteus muscle becomes extracapsular. So this is the reason why it is the interrupted line we show here in the tibia. So this is how we do the circumferential attachment of the fibrous capsule superiorly as well as the inferiorly. Now we see the various ligaments of the knee joint. So knee joint is one of the weight bearing joint of the body. So whenever we stand, whole of the weight is falling on the knee joint. So every effort has been made to make this joint very much strong. As in the evolutionary history, we Homo sapiens, they are the Homo erecticus. It is only and only because of the modification and the very good stability of the standing posture is only and only maintained by this popliteus muscle, which we will make it unlocking muscle, as well as the weight bearing muscle. So the fibrous capsule and the various ligaments attached. So when we discuss the ligaments of the knee joint, so there are two types of ligaments, intracapsular and extracapsular. So first we discuss the extracapsular part of the ligaments. So when we view the knee joint medially, what we see here is the medial or the tibial collateral ligament. So this is about 2 inches long and 1 inch broad. So it resembles the band-aid we apply on our injury fingers. So it starts. So actually, this medial or tibial collateral ligament is the remnant, or it is the extension, or it is the hamstring part of the adductor magnus. As we see, the adductor magnus muscle is inserted on the linea aspera, and then the last brown muscle fibers, they end by the insertion into the adductor tubercle. So beyond the adductor tubercle, only the aponeurotic fibers of the hamstring muscles of the adductor magnus start from the adductor tubercle, running downward, and then they get attached to the medial surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. So this green band of the tibial collateral ligament constitute the hamstring part of the adductor magnus. Because this small part of the ligament, the part of the adductor magnus, fulfills the hamstring rules. The hamstring rules, as we know, first is it has to be take origin from the tibial tuberosity. So if we trace these fibers upward, then we will see that they are taking origin from the ischial tuberosity. Number 2, hamstring muscle has to be inserted on the either bones of the leg. So it is inserting on the tibia. So it is not finishing at the adductor tubercle of the femur. So that's we include in the hamstring part, that is the tibial collateral ligament. Then if we see laterally, so laterally this knee joint is further strengthened by the extra or the outside support by the fibular collateral ligament. So fibular collateral ligament, as the name suggests, it starts is attached to the non-articular part of the lateral surface of the lateral condyle of the femur superiorly, and it descends downward, and it is attached on the lateral side to the apex of the styloid process of the fibula. So it is different from the medial collateral ligament. See, it is not band-like structure. It is a stout and this cylindrical and thickened in the texture, and it joins the fibula with the femur, so it gives the outside support to the knee joint. Otherwise, the fibula is not taking part in the joint formation or weight bearing. So this is the fibular collateral ligament. And another thing about these two ligaments is that, see, the tibial or the medial collateral ligament is fused with the fibrous capsule. Further, this fibrous capsule is further fused with the medial meniscus. This is the reason why the medial meniscus injuries, they are more as compared to the lateral. See on the lateral side what is happening. On the lateral side, if you see the fibular collateral ligament, and this is the fibrous capsule of the knee joint laterally, now I can insert my pen medial to the fibular collateral ligament. So there is a gap between the fibular collateral ligament and the fibrous capsule. So that is why lateral meniscus is saved from the injury. And through this gap passes the tendon of the popliteus and the superior and the inferior, lateral and the medial genicular vessels. So 5 things pass through this gap between this fibrous capsule and fibular collateral ligament. So this is how it will be. Then the third extrinsic ligament or the extracapsular ligament of the knee joint lies posteriorly. Now this is called the oblique popliteal ligament. This oblique popliteal ligament is actually, it is the extension of the tendon of the semimembranosus. As you know, semimembranosus is the one of the hamstring muscle. It comes from the ischial like my stick and vertically downward to the ribbon muscle, because it is called semimembranosus because its origin and insertion width is the same. So it is like a ribbon, and it is attached on the posterior surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. So this brown color represents the semimembranosus muscle has been cut. So it is inserted here. Then from this muscle, these aponeuric fibers, they run upward laterally and obliquely, and they are attached to the posterior surface of the lateral condyle of the femur. So they constitute what is called the oblique popliteal ligament. So it gives the posterior strengthening to the fibrous capsule, or the posterior protection of the fibrous capsule is done by this oblique popliteal ligament. Similarly, the fourth ligament posteriorly, this is the arcuate popliteal ligament. This arcuate popliteal ligament is a Y-shaped ligament. So its apex is attached to the head of the fibula, and its lower band runs obliquely downward, strengthening the fibrous capsule posteriorly, and then get it attached to the medial condyle of the posterior surface of the tibia. So these fibers pass obliquely, form an arc-like structure of the extracapsular part of the popliteus. So that's why it is called the arcuate popliteal ligament. The upper band of this Y-shaped ligament runs upward and medially, and it is attached to the intercondylar rough area of the femur posteriorly, as well as the lateral condyle of the posterior surface of the femur. So this is how it also gives it strengthens the exit point of the popliteus muscle. So it is fused with the fibrous capsule, where the popliteus muscle is becoming extracapsular. In the upper band again is also protecting the fibrous capsule behind the lateral condyle of the tibia as well as the femur. So this is how the outside support to the knee joint is given by these 4 ligaments, one medial, one lateral and 2 posterior. So they constitute what is called the extracapsular. Now the fifth one is this ligamentum patelli. So this ligamentum patelli starts from the apex of the patella and is inserted or attached to the tibial tuberosity inferiorly. Actually, it is a misnomer. It is not a ligament like the other ligaments, but actually this is the part of the tendon of the quadriceps femoris muscle. As it doesn't have got any muscular fibers, only the collagen thick bundles of the tendon, so they constitute the ligamentum patelli or the ligament of the patella. Actually, it is not a ligament, it is the tendon of the quadriceps femoris muscle. So this also protects the anterior because it is very stout and thick. So it protects the joints from the anterior. Now we see the what lies inside, or the intracapsular ligaments of the knee joint. So intracapsular ligament of the knee joint, if you see here, so here we remove these ligaments and this is the posterior part of the fibrous capsule, and we give the cruciate incision to the fibrous capsule to see inside story of the knee joint. When we see the inside, what we see posteriorly, this blue represents the articular surface of the lower end of the femur and the tibia, of the lower end of the femur. And this is the intercondylar rough area of the posterior surface of the femur. This is the medial supracondylar line, this is the lateral supracondylar line. And in between this is a triangular smooth popliteal surface of the femur, where there is no muscle is attached. Only and only this popliteal surface of the femur is related to the popliteal artery, which is touching the lower end of the femur, as it is coming from the hiatus magnus of the adductor magnus, just above the adductor tubercle. And this is the interrupted origin insertion of the adductor magnus shown on the linea aspera, where 7 muscles, aponeurotic muscles, they are taking origin and insertion on the legs. So this is represent the tibial artery, popliteal artery. So it touches the lower end of the femur here. On the popliteal surface is made for this. Why it is smooth and no muscle is given here attachment? Only and only because the popliteal artery has to come and touches this smooth surface. So whenever a patient comes with a fracture of the lower end of the femur, this artery is liable to be injured. This leading to the stoppage of the blood supply to the muscles of the leg and the foot. So this gives the applied importance of popliteal surface and relation of the popliteal artery touching it. Now, similarly, inferior the lower end of the upper end of the tibia represent the medial condyle and the tibia. Lateral condyle. The superior surface of the tibia, lateral and medial condyles, is unequal. Medial superior surface of the tibia is larger, and lateral surface, superior surface of the tibia is smaller. As the two bones they are meeting to form the joint, so in between the two condyles there is a fibrocartilaginous menisci are there. One is called the medial meniscus and another is called the lateral meniscus. So if you see closely, you see this red one is representing the fibrocartilage, that is the medial meniscus and lateral meniscus. So lateral and medial meniscus is larger and it represents the alphabet C, while the lateral surface, lateral condyle is less, so it is alphabetically O shaped, so it is smaller. And the two menisci, the medial anterior and the posterior ends, they look like the horns of the sheep or the goat. That's why they are called the anterior and the posterior horn of the medial and the lateral meniscus. And all of them, 4 of them, they are attached to the intercondylar rough area of the tibia on the superior surface. So there is the attachment here. So intracapsular ligament is the cruciate ligament. So as the name suggests, cruciate ligament, they cross each other. So there are 2 cruciate ligaments. One is called the anterior cruciate ligament, other is called the posterior cruciate ligament. As we are looking the knee joint from posterior side, so what we see here, the posterior cruciate ligament. So posterior cruciate ligament is attached to the posterior-most part of the intercondylar rough area of the superior surface of the tibia, and this posterior cruciate ligament runs upward, forward and medially. And see, it is attached to the lateral surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. So this is the anterior cruciate ligament. So this anterior cruciate ligament is going from posterior to the anterior side. So it will prevent the anterior dislocation or anterior slipping of the femur on the tibia anteriorly. So whenever the femur try to go anteriorly in this location, so this posterior cruciate ligament will pull the femur posteriorly and hence it prevents.
and reciprocally vice versa is the anterior cruciate ligament. So anterior cruciate ligament start from the anterior part of the intercondylar rough area, and if you can see here, the anterior cruciate ligament is coming from the anterior part of the anterior intercondylar rough area of the space surface of the tibia, and it runs backward, laterally, and attached to the medial surface of the lateral condyle of the femur. So from the tibia it is coming and attached to the femur. On which condyle? Lateral condyle. Which surface? Medial surface. So it is coming from anterior to the posterior side. So whenever the femur will try to go backward dislocation, so this cruciate ligament from anterior, so this anterior cruciate ligament, as this direction is from the anterior to the posterior side. So if the femur try to dislocate on the tibia posteriorly, so it will pull the anterior. So anterior cruciate ligament prevent the posterior dislocation of the knee joint, and posterior cruciate ligament will prevent the anterior dislocation of the joint. So hence they are also called the check ligaments. So they check the anterior and the posterior displacement of the femur on the tibia or the knee joint, so that gives the intrinsic or the internal support to the knee joint. So these cruciate ligaments, they are very helpful in the prolonged standing. Out of the anterior cruciate ligament is more prone to the injury in the rotational movements of the knee joint, as it is seen in the football, hockey and the rugby sports. So anterior cruciate ligament is more vulnerable because it is disrooted because of the posterior dislocation or posterior displacement of the femur. In the sports injury it comes. So this is how intrinsically or from inside the internal support is maintained by the fibrocartilages, that is the menisci, lateral and medial meniscus and their attachment, and the anterior and the posterior cruciate ligament, which give the internal support to them. Now we go anteriorly again, and we will see the position of the synovial membrane in the knee joint. Synovial knee joint is the only largest, biggest joint of the human body which bears the largest surface area of the synovial membrane, which has got the property to secrete this synovial fluid. But you will be surprised, knee joint has got the maximum amount of the synovial fluid in the all synovial joints of the human body. And you will be surprised to note that the amount of this synovial fluid is only and only 1 ml. But this is largest or the highest amount of the synovial joint found in the synovial joints of the body. Now in order to see the inside story of the knee joint, now what I do, I cut the vastus medialis muscle, I cut the medial reticula, which is the only, and I cut the vertical cut is made on the lateral border of the quadriceps femoris or the vastus intermedialis, and separating the medial vastus medialis and its reticula and the fibrous capsule laterally. Now here I can see the inside story of the what is the knee joint is visible in the lateral view or medial side to see the inside story. Now this purple color I have made is the synovial membrane. Now since the synovial membrane is the largest membrane of the joint and the knee joint. Now, and it forms the suprapatellar bursa. Now see, this is the quadriceps femoris muscle coming for the insertion on the tibial tuberosity here. And the last fibers of the vastus medialis come from the anterior surface of the shaft of the femur from here. And they go downward and they merge with all the three parts and they form a tendon, is the quadriceps femoris, and going to run. Now, if my finger is the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, this is the anterior surface of the tendon and this is the posterior surface. Now when it is inserted on the tibial tuberosity, the lower end of the quadriceps femoris tendon, the posterior surface of the tendon is now rubbing against the upper anterior surface above the tibia to constitute the tibia. And because of the flexion and extension, which is the major movement of the knee joint, there will be friction behind the posterior surface of the tendon of the quadriceps with the tibia. So this will be ruptured or damaged. So in order to prevent this rupture or the damage of the posterior surface of the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, the God has made the packing material of the human body, that is the yellow color fat. So a fat yellow color amount is stuffed here to separate the lower end of the quadriceps femoris as away as possible from the anterior surface of the tibia above the tibial tuberosity. So this is called the infrapatellar pad of the fat. This is the need of the hour. Otherwise, the tendon may have been damaged. Now, see above this, here it is, now this is protected. The posterior surface below is protected. Now see the middle part of the tendon, the posterior surface. Now this middle part of the posterior surface of the tendon, now it is touching the lower end of the femur. Again, bone is the hardest tissue and tendon is soft. So because of the repeated extension and flexion, what will happen? The middle part of the tendon of the posterior surface of the tendon of the quadriceps femoris will be damaged. So what the God has done? So from posterior surface of the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, the God has created a sesamoid bone. So a bone is developed in the tendon of the quadriceps femoris, and this, we know the patella is covered by the articular cartilage. Similarly, the anterior surface of the patellar surface of the femur also bears the articular cartilage. So articular cartilage of the patella and articular cartilage of the lower end of the patellar surface of the femur, they join and there will be no damage to the tendon. So tendon is saved again. Again the patella is the need of the hour. So this is how this protection has been given. So patella is a sesamoid bone. Sesamoid word means seed-like. It develops in the tendon of the muscle. That is the prerequisite of any sesamoid bone of the body. This is the largest sesamoid bone in the body, patella. Sesamoid word means seed-like. As in the botany, we see there are two types of the plant kingdom. One they are angiosperm, other they are gymnosperm. What is the prerequisite of the characteristic feature of the angiosperm? The seeds of the angiosperm plants, they are covered. And gymnosperm, they are uncovered, the firm. So angiosperm, they are covered. So that's why the word sesamoid means seed, like as seed is hidden in the legume. Best example is the pea. We can't see the pea because it is under the legume. When we open the legume, then we see the pea inside. Same is here. If you want to see the sesamoid bone, you have to cut the tendon of the quadriceps femoris. Then you have to bring the patella out from the tendon of the quadriceps femoris like a seed. So that's why it's called the sesamoid bone. Now, above the patella, again, the upper part of the posterior surface of the quadriceps femoris is again vulnerable because it will touch the anterior surface of the shaft of the femur. So, this posterior surface will be damaged. So, the God is God. Great. So, what he has done, the God has made both the surface covered by the synovial membrane. So synovial membrane attachment anteriorly it is attached to the upper part of the patella. And from the upper patella, now it is attached to the posterior surface of the tendon of the quadriceps femoris. Then it goes upward and just below the origin of the last fibers of the vastus intermedialis from here, it will take a U-turn. And this synovial membrane take a U-turn and then it goes downward and get attached to the anterior surface of the shaft of the femur just below the origin of the vastus intermedialis. And this is how it forms the double fold of the synovial membrane. And if you trace it inferiorly, what you will see? Now this synovial membrane is attached to the upper border of the patellar surface of the femur. Because it is delicate membrane, it will be crushed when it comes between the bone. So it is away from the bones where the friction is real. So this shows the attachment of the synovial membrane. So as it takes the U-turn, now this form it is filled with the synovial fluid, so it forms the suprapatellar bursa. So this is the largest bursa, suprapatellar bursa, as it lies above the patella, so it is called the suprapatellar. So this U-turning of the synovial membrane has made the suprapatellar bursa. Now, another thing we have to see that there are chances that this synovial membrane may fall downward. while and it will be crushed between the patella and the femur. So in order to prevent the downward fall of this sphenoid membrane, a very specific small muscle fibers has been created here, which are 2 or 3 strips. They take origin from the anterior surface of the shaft of the femur, just below the origin of the vastus intermediaris. And these muscles, they take origin from the femur, they are inserted on this U-turning of the synovial membrane. So these muscles, they keep the synovial membrane tucked upward and prevent it fall downward, being crushed in all movements of the knee joint. So these small slips of the fibers, muscle fiber, they are called the articularis genu muscles. So articularis genu muscles, they are made for the insertion of the inserted, so they take origin from the bone femur and inserted on the synovial membrane. So they are very special muscles and their function. Now the infrapatellar pad of the fat, it is also contained here, it is also fixed here, again by this purple color synovial membrane. So this synovial membrane anteriorly attached to the lower border of the apex of this sesamoid bone, that is the patella, and this synovial membrane then goes downward, then posteriorly, and keeping the infrapatellar pad of the fat downward, and it fixes them in their anatomical position, the infrapatellar pad of the fat. Then this synovial membrane goes superiorly and anteriorly, anterior to the in the intercondylar rough area of the tibia. And here, as we know, anterior cruciate ligament is the anteriormost attachment on this tibial superior surface. So this synovial membrane goes a little bit inside the intercondylar rough area of the tibia, and it covers the anterior surface of the anterior cruciate ligament, and is attached to the rough area, and it constitutes what is called the alar ligaments. So these alar ligaments, they are protecting or they are covering the anterior surface of the anterior cruciate ligament, so they are also the part of the synovial membrane. So this is how the disposition of the synovial membrane in the whole of this knee joint is seen. Now again there are 2 more bursa. One is anterior to the patella, is called the prepatellar subcutaneous or housemaid's knee bursa. Another is behind the, in front of the tibial tuberosity. It is called the washerman's bursa. So all these bursa, actually there are 12 bursa around the knee joint. If you count, there are 12. As we say, 12 bursi means 12 bursa. You have to remember. Anybody asks you how many bursa? 12 bursi, 12 bursa, they are present all around the knee joint, related to the various muscles and the structures around it. Thank you.